Welcome everyone. Today I will explain one of the horror thriller mystery movie from 2020, Books of Blood. So, relax and enjoy. The movie starts with a strange lady talking. She says when people die, some deaths are so scary that we never forget them. She mentions a place where these scary stories are remembered because the dead want their stories to be told. Then, we see a man organizing books in a shop. Suddenly, a thug named Bennett comes in with a knife. It turns out the man owes Bennett some money and hasn't been able to pay for a while. In a final attempt to save himself, the bookseller tells Bennett about a valuable book worth a lot of money and shows him where it is. But even after that, Bennett kills him by cutting his throat. Bennett leaves the store and tells his friend about the valuable book named the Book of Blood. Meanwhile, the dead bookseller has a smile on his face, showing he tricked Bennett into a dangerous task. Then, we see the name Jenna carved on someone's bloody skin. The scene changes to a young college student named Jenna, who lives with her parents in a big house near the ocean. She was depressed, as something traumatic had happened to her friend and she really loved her friend. Her mom tries to get her to talk about it, but Jenna prefers to keep her feelings inside. During dinner, we find out that Jenna gets annoyed easily by regular sounds like chewing, water dripping, and laughing. To block out the sounds, she often wears headphones that cancel noise. Later at night, Jenna hears her parents talking about sending her somewhere to help her feel better and act more like herself again. After finding out about her parents' choice, she chooses to leave home and escape. At midnight, while her parents are asleep, she quietly goes into their room and takes some money from the safe. She packs her clothes and goes straight to the bus station. With no destination in mind, she requests a ticket to Los Angeles. But as she leaves the station, Jenna sees a weird man dressed in black watching her. She runs and boards the bus. Throughout the trip, Jenna gets annoyed by the sounds of people eating behind her seat. She wears her headphones, but still feels paranoid when she notices odd things in the overhead compartment. A few hours later, the same man in black gets on the bus and sits down, which scares Jenna. She decides to get off the bus right away at the next stop. While wandering around without a plan, she almost gets hit by a speeding car. Jenna then goes into a cyber cafe and looks for places to stay nearby. In the following scene, Jenna reaches the large homestay where she receives a warm welcome from the owners, an elderly couple named Ellie and Sam. After settling into her room, she meets Gavin, another guest staying there. With limited choices, Jenna decides to book a budget-friendly accommodation. They have a casual conversation before going their separate ways. Later that night, as Jenna is getting ready for bed, she hears strange noises coming from the walls of her room. Investigating further, she sees a cockroach crawling out from an intact wall. She gets scared and as she turns back she gets bumped into the hostess Ellie. Ellie tries to comfort Jenny and offers her some tea and cake. Later, Ellie shares that she used to work as a nurse, and her husband Sam is a carpenter. During their conversation, a big cockroach appears, but Ellie swiftly removes it. Sam acknowledges they have a roach problem but assures they'll address it soon. After the gathering, Jenny confides in Gavin about her misophonia, a condition making her sensitive to sounds. Sometimes, Jenna feels like she wishes she'd never been born. After hearing her talk about her feelings, Gavin feels bad for her and invites her for coffee the next day, and she accepts. They exchange numbers and plan to meet up. Unfortunately, that night, Jenna experiences sleep paralysis. She has a disturbing vision of her mother drinking wine. Later, Gavin arrives and tries to initiate intimacy with her. Next, the elderly couple performs a ritual with Jenna, but she notices the same man in black eerily staring at her through the window. Shortly after, she dreams of vomiting hundreds of cockroaches, realizing it was all a nightmare. The next morning, Jenna heads to a nearby cafe to meet Gavin for coffee. After waiting for him for a while, she becomes concerned when he doesn't show up. Suddenly, she sees the creepy man in black watching her again. Understanding she's being followed, Jenna swiftly leaves through the back door. She returns to the homestay and opens up to Ellie about her mental struggles. In response, the elderly lady comforts Jenna and suggests she extend her stay to help clear her mind. Ellie also gives her a tour of the garden, introducing her to various plants. Later that night, Jenna hears scratching noises from her room's wall again. Investigating further, she discovers a hidden cabinet. Upon opening it, she's shocked to find a woman who looks like a zombie, with her eyes and ears stitched shut. Just then, Ellie knocks on the door, and Jenna receives a text from Gavin. Worried, she asks Gavin to call the police. However, she's stunned to realize that the messages are actually from Ellie, not Gavin. Suddenly, the zombie woman grabs Jenna's hair through the wall, prompting Ellie to check on her. Realizing she's in danger, Jenna swiftly strikes Ellie in the head when she enters the room. Jenna tries every door in the house, but they're all locked. Desperate to escape, she searches the walls until she discovers a hidden passage. Without hesitation, Jenna enters the dark room, only to find several zombie-like people imprisoned inside. Somehow, she manages to escape to the ground floor, only to be confronted by Sam. Ellie sedates Jenna, and when she wakes up, she finds herself confined to a chair, able to see and hear but unable to move. Ellie discloses that years ago, her daughter's family attempted to leave the house, but she prevented their departure. To ensure they stayed, the couple immobilized them, concealing them within the walls and beneath the floors, believing it provided a better life. Gavin is the latest victim, trapped somewhere in a corner. Ellie asserts she's shielding these individuals from the harsh world, feeding them regularly to sustain their lives. Now, it's Ellie's turn to be immobilized and placed within the walls. She injects Jenna with a catatonic syringe to seal her eyes, but before she can proceed further, there's a knock at the door. Ellie discovers a man in black holding a picture of his son with Jenna, asking if she's present. He discloses he's been tracking her to have a conversation. Ellie claims Jenna left hours ago but invites the man in for tea. The man then reveals Tony and Jenna were a couple. He's been searching for Jenna because she was on the call with Tony the night he died. Unfortunately, before he can elaborate further, Sam attacks him from behind, eliminating him. Meanwhile, Jenna regains her senses and attempts to escape. Somehow, she manages to crawl through the floor and leap out of the window. Seeking refuge, she enters a nearby shed but quickly flees after encountering the mutilated remains of a man. With no other options, Jenna hides in the back seat of the man in black's car. Sam loads the deceased man into the same car and drives away. Ellie follows closely in her own vehicle. After a while, they reach a secluded location atop a hill. Sam steps out of the car near a cliff. He pushes the car in a way that makes it fall off the edge. Jenna was still inside, yelling scared as the car tumbled down. Next, we see a name, Miles, scratched into someone's bloody skin. It's not clear what this means yet. Then, a fuzzy video shows a naked man in a tiny room. It's scary! All of a sudden, the lights go out and something weird happens. The man screams real loud. When the lights come back on, there's scary writing all over the walls, like something bad was there. A lady named Mary who studies mysterious things watches the video. She thinks it's fake and doesn't worry about it. Later, we find out Mary's son, Miles, is very sick with cancer. Mary visits the hospital to see her son, Miles. But outside the room, she bumps into her ex-husband, the one who left the family a long time ago. Mary is angry and won't let him see Miles. Inside, she finds Miles very sick. All he wants is to stay with his mom forever. Sadly, Miles passes away a few days later. Mary is heartbroken, but tries to be strong and goes back to work. At the office, she finds a stranger named Simon waiting. He sent her the scary video a few days ago. Even weirder, Simon says he's the naked man from the video and can talk to the dead. Mary thinks he's crazy and tells him to leave. But then, Simon says he has a message from Miles. Now Mary stops and listens. The scene changes to a few weeks later, and we see that the two people are now a couple. They've started a group that invites famous smart people from around the world to talk with dead people. Next, we go back in time to a memory. In one of their first tests, Simon takes off his clothes and goes into an empty room. While the visitors watch from outside, Mary checks Simon really well to see if he's hiding anything. After she finishes checking, she leaves the room and locks the door. Simon then warns them that the test could get scary because he's going to try to talk to the dead. Suddenly, the lights go out, and he screams desperately. When the lights come back on, Simon is having a seizure on the floor, and there are bloody writings on the walls, just like in the previous video. One of the messages seems to be from Miles, saying he's not asleep. Mary is surprised and thinks it's her son's message. After that, she starts liking Simon more and studies him more. When she takes him home, he goes straight to Miles' room and says the boy is there. Mary is confused why her son is talking to a stranger instead of her, and Simon gives a vague explanation. The young man who comes into her life makes her feel hopeful and happy, and she becomes close to him. They keep doing their experiments and start a group. Mary feels like she's closer to her son when she's with Simon. But one day, she catches Simon drunk with another girl. He accidentally admits he's a fraud who tricked her. He's not a messenger of the dead. He just found out about Miles from her ex-husband. He rigged the room for the experiment by paying someone to cut off the power for a few seconds. For the messages, he actually wrote them the night before using a special chemical. This chemical stays invisible until it's exposed to another substance. And to make the seizures look real, he injected himself with a tiny bit of medicine, penicillin, an hour before the performance. When Mary hears all this, she's crushed, and she goes to her son's room. There, as she hugs his favorite toy, something invisible starts writing on the nearby board. It says, "Bring him to us." In the morning, Simon, now sober, comes to Mary, says sorry for what he did, and plans to leave. But she asks him to go on with the performance, saying there's a lot of money involved. Simon is surprised because he expected her to be mad, but he agrees to do it anyway. The movie then jumps to the present, where Mary is meeting with some people who want to invest money. She happily says that Simon will show them his special powers live. Simon is surprised because he's not ready for the show, but Mary tells him to just go along with it. She takes him to Miles' room, makes him take off his clothes, and locks the door. She tells the audience to keep the door closed, no matter what. Suddenly, Simon sees the chair move, and then he sees the ghost of Miles sitting there. Then, other spirits show up and start hurting him. They cut his skin and write many messages on him. Simon begs for help, but Mary doesn't do anything. The whole town goes dark all of a sudden. When Mary finally opens the door, she finds Simon on the floor, covered in blood and barely alive. His whole body has messages from the dead written on it. We see the name Bennett written in blood, then the scene shifts back to Bennett and his friend, Steve. They're heading to a place called Ravenmoor, in search of the Book of Blood, and almost hit a girl. It was Jenna. As they get near Ravenmoor, Steve warns Bennett the place is haunted, but Bennett, focused on money, insists they keep moving inside. Once they enter Ravenmoor, strange things happen. Their car battery dies inexplicably, leaving them stranded. While Bennett checks the car, Steve sees his mother's spirit and follows her to a nearby church. Bennett finds Steve holding a gun to his own throat, possessed by a spirit. Then we see Steve shoot himself after seeing his mother's spirit. Terrified, Bennett leaves the church and walks through dark streets until he reaches Mary's house. The dust has settled everywhere, making it seem like nobody has lived here for a long time. After looking around a bit, Bennett hears laughter from upstairs. He goes to Miles' room and finds the now old Mary and Simon there. Despite the scary situation, Bennett points his gun at Mary and demands the Book of Blood. But Mary says Simon is the book. His body has stories written by the dead carved into it. She tells Bennett he's not the first to come looking for the book, and won't be the last. Suddenly, Bennett sees his name carved on Simon's body just as he's attacked by lots of rats. Bennett runs outside and tries to kill the rats with a knife, but he ends up accidentally stabbing himself several times. Bleeding heavily, he staggers through the streets until he reaches Ellie and Sam's house. Inside, the old man is handling Gavin's body. Bennett doesn't know how to react, and Ellie attacks him from behind, killing him. The scene shifts to Jenna in the hospital, having survived the accident. The police tell her parents they found her body next to Tony's father's. Jenna's mom then tells everyone that Tony and Jenna used to be in a relationship before he sadly died. A few days later, Jenna leaves the hospital, but she's really sad. One night, she starts thinking about the good times she had with her ex-boyfriend. Then, we see a memory of Jenna's last talk with Tony. They're both depression patients trying to get better. In a surprising twist, we find out Jenna encouraged Tony to kill himself. They made a pact to die together, but Jenna couldn't go through with it. She pretended to be on the roof with him, but was actually at home. Tony was scared too, but when Jenna called him a coward, he jumped off the building. Now, Jenna feels really bad about what she did and cries thinking about it. Tired of her life, she runs away from home and asks an evil couple to end her suffering. They agree and do an experiment on her, sewing her eyes and ears shut. The movie ends with Jenna buried in one of their chambers. She's smiling because she can finally escape from the voices tormenting her.